Hey everyone, welcome to Sidetrack Adventures. This is Steve. Right now I'm in Hesperia, California, right near the southern end of Highway 395. This highway is considered by some to be the most scenic drive in the state, and over the next few days, we'll be heading north, up through the high desert, and along the edge of the Eastern Sierra. Along the way, we'll stop to explore forgotten places, strange stories, and bits of hidden history that most people just drive right past. But enough standing around here, let's hit the road and see what there is to see. Here is the current southern terminus of Highway 395. It hits Interstate 15 right over there. And we're going to be heading north this way. The part of the highway that's considered to be extremely scenic, and by far the best known stretch, is the section between the Nevada state line and Bishop or Lone Pine. Here at the beginning, the traffic can get pretty bad, and getting stuck behind slower moving trucks isn't uncommon, but it should start to clear out as we get away from the city. So we started this drive right next to Highway 395's junction with Interstate 15, near Hesperia. Officially known as US Route 395, this highway travels 1,305 miles from Southern California to the Canadian border, passing through California, Nevada, Oregon, and Washington. But it used to go even farther. When it was first commissioned in 1926, US 395 was just a short spur route from Spokane, Washington to the Canadian border, connecting with US Route 195. That all changed in 1934 when, using pre-existing roads, the route was extended dramatically, all the way south to San Diego, ending near the heart of the city at Park and Market Streets. Because it once stretched nearly from Mexico to Canada, it earned the nickname the Three Flags Highway. For over 4 decades, US 395 remained an international spine of the West Coast. But in 1979, the southern portion of the highway, south of Interstate 15, was decommissioned, and today it officially begins just outside of Hesperia. Through California alone, Highway 395 covers about 557 miles, though it briefly dips in and out of Nevada. This first stretch, from its current southern terminus to the Nevada border, runs roughly 355 miles, passing through the high desert, then the dramatic backdrop of the Eastern Sierra. Despite being a US highway, much of 395 still feels wild and isolated. Parts of it are just 2-lane blacktop, slicing through vast, open landscapes, places where time seems to slow down. To me, that is the highway's biggest appeal. There is so much to see and explore on this section of Highway 395, it would take a lifetime to see it all. But we're going to try and visit as many places as we can. Our first stop on this Highway 395 trip is the living ghost town of Randsburg. It seems like nothing is open today, but we'll take a quick look around. This town was founded in 1895 as Rand Camp after the discovery of gold nearby, and was renamed Randsburg by late 1896. This part of town looks more like a movie set, but this was a boom town by 1897 with around 1,500 residents and over 300 buildings. The population peaked here at around 3,500 by 1899. The main draw to the area was the Yellow Aster Mine, which was really the core of the Rand mining district. From 1895 to 1933, the Yellow Aster mine produced about $25 million in gold. Gold, silver, and tungsten extraction here extended into the mid-20th century. Here's the Opera House. Unfortunately, I don't know the history of a lot of the buildings here, as some are later recreations meant to capture the spirit of the town's Old West days. There was an opera house here in the late 1800s, but there were also a number of devastating fires that destroyed most of the town. As the easily extracted gold was exhausted, mining in the area slowed down, but the discovery of tungsten and silver nearby kept the town going a little longer. The Yellow Aster mine finally shut down in 1939, but small-scale mining activity lasted until about 2006. The Cottage Hotel here was built in 1930, really at the end of the town's mining glory days. As of the 2020 census, the population of Randsburg stands at just 45 people, down from 69 in 2010. But it's nice to see that at least some of the people who do remain have a great sense of humor, as this yard is filled with skeletons. And also a grave for a claim jumper. Here's the town jail. This is one of the only buildings in town that survived the fires and dates back to the town's boom period. This was last used as a jail in 1969, which is probably much more recent than you'd think, but a couple people got drunk and were put in here for the night. This place is definitely worth a stop if you're in the area, but it's time for us to get back on the road. Pretty much everything is behind a fence, but we are now in Pearsonville, and with just 8 residents as of the 2020 census, it is, or was, the hubcap capital of the world. There really isn't much to see here aside from this Uniroyal gal that's getting more and more faded all the time, but the place does have an interesting story. There are also some great views of the beginning of the Sierra Nevada across the highway too. Lucy Pearson, known as the Hubcap Queen, originally hailed from Kentucky. She met and married Andy Pearson, and together they purchased desert land and founded Pearsonville in the early 1960s. Andy and Lucy built a modest roadside setup, a cafe plus rooming, and Andy and their teenage son Don started assisting stranded motorists along Highway 395. Over time, their business expanded into a large junkyard and even a quarter-mile dirt racetrack, the Pearsonville Speedway, hosting stock car events like the Turkey Classic. Pearsonville grew into a known waypoint on the highway. In the 1980s, when Andy retired and Don took over operations, Lucy began collecting hubcaps as a hobby. The collection eventually topped an astonishing 140,000, earning her the moniker Hubcap Queen and putting Pearsonville on the map as the hubcap capital of the world. Lucy Pearson passed away in 2020, but there still is an active gas station here in Pearsonville. The highway through this area is signed as the Grand Army of the Republic Highway. I feel like the Grand Army of the Republic isn't well known today, but a little over a century ago, they were extremely influential. The Grand Army of the Republic was a fraternal organization founded in 1866 for Union veterans of the American Civil War. It quickly grew into one of the most influential veterans groups in United States history. At its peak in the late 19th century, the organization had hundreds of thousands of members and played a major role in advocating for veterans' pensions, patriotic education, and Memorial Day, which it helped establish as a national holiday. They also wielded significant political influence. In the 1930s, an organization called the Sons of the Union Veterans of the Civil War, in order to honor the now aging Civil War veterans, began a campaign to get a major highway named in honor of the Grand Army of the Republic. U.S. Route 6, which was the longest highway in the country, was selected, and the first state formally designated their section of the Grand Army of the Republic Highway in 1934. Eventually, every other state along the route followed suit, ending with California in 1953. Highway 395 and 6 overlapped in this area, and that's why this section is signed as being part of the Grand Army of the Republic Highway. Since membership was only open to Union veterans of the Civil War, membership declined as veterans aged, and the organization was formally dissolved in 1956 after the death of its last member. Today, its legacy lives on through a number of patriotic acts that we still practice. Things like observing Memorial Day, placing flags on veterans' graves, and standing for the national anthem all originated with the Grand Army of the Republic. This stretch of road is also signed as El Camino Sierra. In 1910, the Inyo Good Road Club spearheaded a campaign to build a modern, paved road through the Owens Valley and eastern Sierra. They successfully persuaded Governor James Gillett to dedicate the route as El Camino Sierra that August, in an effort to attract both tourists and state funding. We are taking a slight detour off Highway 395 to visit a place called Fossil Falls. We are only just at the parking lot, and it already looks like we've traveled to another world. It's supposed to be about a quarter-mile hike from the parking lot to the actual Fossil Falls site. This is the first time I've actually stopped at this place. I usually just pass it by in a hurry to get somewhere else, so I'm not quite sure what to expect. What I do know is that, despite the name, Fossil Falls is neither a waterfall nor a fossil site. It's what's left over from ancient volcanic activity and glacial water erosion. Check out the top of this rock. It looks pretty cool. It looks like we've about made it to the falls. The so-called falls formed when several lava flows, occurring between about 400,000 and 10,000 years ago, blanketed the Owens River channel. During the last ice age, melting waters carved into this basalt and polished and sculpted it. And this is far more impressive than I thought it would be, and a lot deeper too. Just to give you an idea of how deep this thing is, I'd say it's at least about 100 feet down there. And it stretches on, kind of like the earth opened up. Here's another look down. You can see why this is called Fossil Falls. There are all sorts of holes throughout the rocks here, and they kind of look man-made, but they're purely natural. The first humans came to this area between 10 to 20,000 years ago and chipped obsidian to use for tools. And I wonder what they thought of this place and what they thought it was. I can't believe I've never stopped here before, because this place looks absolutely amazing. You really feel like you're on an alien world. But Highway 395 is off in the distance, calling us to get back on the road. The area we are approaching now is called Coso Junction. There are a number of mysterious creatures who are said to inhabit portions of this road, according to local legend, if you believe that sort of thing. The area we are driving through now is said to be home to a demon donkey. The story goes that in the 1800s, wary travelers would run into an apparently friendly donkey that would lead the travelers to what they thought was a place to rest for the night. I guess after crossing the desert to get here, following a donkey doesn't seem like a bad idea. But it was a bad idea, because the donkey would always lead them to their death. You see, the donkey was a pet of the devil, and its job was to lead travelers to hell. People still claim to encounter it from time to time, so if we see any donkeys on the trip, we won't be following them. The place we've stopped at now is little more than ruins, but it was called Dunmovin. This place was originally called Cowan Station, named after a homesteader named James Cowan. It served in the early 1900s as a freight station for hauling silver from the Cerro Gordo mines to Los Angeles. Cowan had built a small service stop with a store, cafe, and rudimentary accommodations, and operated until the early 1930s, before closing due to financial issues. In 1936, Charles and Hilda King acquired the site and renamed it Dunmovin, because they were done moving. They reopened the stop to cater to highway travelers. From 1938 to 1941, there was even a post office here, marking a brief period of growth. The Kings then sold to Gordon and Ruth Cooper in 1961, who ran everything into the 1970s, before everything fell into disrepair. You could see how close this place is to Highway 395. It was really prime real estate, but as cars improved, there was less need for them to stop all the time. Here's where the cafe's sign once was. You check out the rock entranceway to the cafe. We'll take a quick look inside. Hopefully no one's living in there. And you can still see the carpet on the ground. Definitely 1960s carpet. But it's been pretty sufficiently vandalized and destroyed. Oh, and they did have a fireplace. I think this over here is one of the cabins where if you needed a room for the night, you would sleep. Let's take a look. And no, I'm wrong. This is one of the restrooms. This place may be done moving, but we aren't. So let's get back on the road. We are now in the small town of Olancha, and this building is the Air Flight Cafe and was built in 1948. It has a little bit of notoriety because it appeared in an episode of the Twilight Zone, 100 Yards Over the Rim. In that episode, a group is crossing New Mexico by wagon in the 1840s, and the leader of the group goes over a hill to see if he can find water, and ends up in 1961, and is amazed by things like paved roads and telephone poles and cars. He then ends up coming across this cafe. And I know the episode's over 60 years old now, but I won't give any further spoilers, just in case anyone wants to watch it. Another episode of The Twilight Zone, Third from the Sun, was also filmed in this area. And right across the street from the Air Flight Cafe is this old gas station. We've gone down the street just a little bit, and we are now at the statues of Highway 395, which is always a fun stop. We are actually on an older section of Highway 395 right now. It was recently bypassed to go around the town, so there isn't much traffic going by anymore. These statues are all pretty wild. They were created by artist Yale Hoffman, and they're said to be symbolic scenes that explore themes like struggle, identity, give and take interactions, and emotional motives. On some of them, it's pretty easy to tell what the theme is. Others, I'm not so sure. This one is Eve. She has the snake in one hand and the apple in the other. And this one over here, I'm not so sure what the theme is. Maybe just go into the office. And here is the give and take. Here's the take, but before we take something, we should give something, and I have a sticker here. Alright, so let's go ahead and take something. Let's see what we have here. Not much, but I guess we'll grab this. Maybe it's a secret message. And there's no message. I guess it was just origami and I messed it up. We have to make one more stop in Olancha, and that's Gus Fresh Jerky. This place opened in 1996, making it one of the originators of the roadside jerky stops. And apparently there is a guard rooster on duty. I don't know if he's going to let us in or not. I'll try to go around him. No, he's leading us in. I'm sure there'll be some interesting jokes in the comments about this large, dark rooster that I can't make, but here's what it looks like inside of Gus Fresh Jerky, and apparently only the rooster is on duty today. Hopefully there's no chicken jerky coming up. Oh, he didn't like that one. So that's Gus Fresh Jerky in Olancha. And unfortunately, we didn't get anything on this visit, because I don't think the rooster knows how to work the cash register, but it's normally a good place to grab some snacks for the road. We are now right outside of Olancha, and none of the buildings are left, but in what has to be in the running for worst named places, this is the site of Dirty Socks Hot Springs, California. In 1917, while drilling for fresh water, a well unexpectedly tapped hot mineral water from about 12,000 feet deep. Rather than pure, it smelled strongly of sulfur, leading locals to say it smelled like dirty socks, and ultimately giving it that name. There was folklore that miners at nearby Cerro Gordo, which was a mining town in the mountains, and the subject of an excellent YouTube channel, Ghost Town Living, washed soiled clothing in the pool, and that's how it got the smell, but the odor is actually volcanic sulfur, not dirty laundry. In 1927, a concrete pool and buildings were constructed to develop a hot springs resort. However, it failed and most structures were removed by the mid-1940s. Who would think that a place called Dirty Socks Hot Springs would fail to attract tourists? Then in 1965, Inyo County designated about 45 acres around the spring as Dirty Socks Hot Springs County Park, adding an access road, bathrooms, and picnic areas. Unfortunately, repeated vandalism, including shooting trash cans and neglect, led to the park closure in 1978. The facilities were removed and its care discontinued. The concrete pool is still out there though. We're getting back on the highway, but had to make a quick stop to get a shot of the Lemon House Inn here. We are arriving at the town of Lone Pine, and this is where most people feel like the really scenic part of Highway 395 begins. We are actually going to be taking a quick detour off Highway 395 for a bit, but first to stop at the Museum of Western Film History here in Lone Pine, as it will tie into our next stop. If you're a fan of Western films like I am, then this museum is a must stop. It's actually worth coming to Lone Pine just to see it by itself. There is so much here. I could easily spend a few hours here. Here's a little section on TV westerns, and it's kind of done up like a 1950s house, complete with a bunk bed and the Lone Ranger and Tonto. Here's a whole section on singing cowboys like Roy Rogers and Gene Autry. Here's some more Gene Autry memorabilia. I think I was always more of a Roy Rogers fan over Gene Autry, but I like them both. And speaking of Roy Rogers, right over here is Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. Here is a section on Tom Mix, who was one of the biggest stars of the silent film era. In 1940, he was killed in a single-car accident on Highway 80 in Arizona. He was a huge star with movies, a radio show, comic books, but I don't think a lot of people remember him today. And here's Audie Murphy, the most decorated soldier of World War II. After the war, he became an actor, appearing in over 40 films. His movie To Hell and Back was the highest-grossing film in Universal Pictures history until Jaws came out in the 1970s. It looks like there's a section for non-Western films. The reason this museum is here is because so many movies have been filmed nearby in the Alabama Hills, which are right outside of Lone Pine, including the first Iron Man. Here are some more movies that were partially shot in the Alabama hills, including Tremors. Over 400 films have been shot there, and that's not even including all of the TV shows that were filmed there too. Like I said earlier, I could easily spend hours here, but let's go ahead and head out to the Alabama hills. We are now heading a little bit west of Lone Pine, and really, we aren't heading that far out of the way, only a few miles. Now we're in the Alabama hills, the filming location for countless movies, though I'm not sure if this thing behind me has been in any or not, but this is Nightmare Rock, and you could probably see why it's called that. I'm not sure when the tradition of painting a face on Nightmare Rock began, but the face is always changing. If you've ever been to Alabama, you probably know that there is no place in that state that looks like this. This area was named by Confederate sympathizers in the 1860s who were fans of the CSS Alabama, a Confederate raider ship. Union supporters nearby actually named their mines after Union ships in response. So these hills were part of a Civil War era naming battle. Just look across the way. You could see why so many science fiction movies have been filmed here. And then we have the incredible backdrop of the Sierra Nevada. And of course, there were all the westerns filmed here. Starting in the 1920s, Hollywood realized this place looked like the perfect Wild West. Ever since, hundreds of movies have been filmed here. As we saw at the museum, everything from The Lone Ranger to Tremors, Iron Man, and even parts of Gladiator. I can just imagine some bandits behind these rocks. But what I really wanted to see is this little arch over here. We'll be going to see a much more impressive arch in just a bit. I'm on the trail to Mobius Arch now, but from here in the parking lot, you can see an arch called Heart Arch. There is nothing like walking around the Alabama hills. I mean, if you think about it, Roy Rogers rode through here, John Wayne staged gunfights here. That dirt road we just drove on to get here has probably been in dozens of different films. I mean, just look at this area. Thanks to Hollywood, this is the Wild West. This trail to Mobius Arch only takes about 10 to 15 minutes or so, and is a loop, so it isn't that rough of a hike. We saw Iron Man at the museum, but another movie that parts of it were filmed out here that doesn't get that much attention, but was really the first superhero movie, was The Adventures of Captain Marvel from 1941. That movie was a 12-part Republic serial, but it was the first live-action movie with a comic book superhero. And here is Mobius Arch. It's not huge, but it has this perfect, smooth curve that makes it look like something sculpted intentionally. It was formed over countless years as wind and water eroded the granite, carving out the hole and rounding the edges. One of the things that makes this arch so amazing, and by far one of the most photographed spots out here, is right behind it is Mount Whitney, the tallest mountain in the lower 48 states. and you could frame the mountain perfectly with the arch. I thought we might run into a snake out here, as this is the perfect time of day for them, but not a single one. I might regret saying this later, but at this point, I think snakes are afraid of me. So whether you come out here for the views, the movies, or just to take a short hike to an arch in the middle of nowhere, the Alabama Hills are one of those places that feels like it belongs to another world. And maybe that's why it's shown up in so many of them. We are now back on Highway 395 heading through Lone Pine, and our next stop will likely be the saddest stop of the trip. Actually, I take that back. The saddest stop will be the next one after this. I wanted to get a shot of the Mount Whitney Motel with Mount Whitney in the background, though the clouds are starting to come in and it's getting a little harder to see. We are now at the Manzanar National Historic Site. During World War II, over 10,000 Japanese Americans, most of them United States citizens, were brought here against their will. Their only crime was their ancestry. You can see one of the guard towers set up. I'm not actually sure if this is original to the 1940s or a recreation. There are some recreations here. After the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, fear and prejudice took hold. In 1942, the United States government ordered over 100,000 Japanese Americans to be removed from their homes on the West Coast. Manzanar was one of 10 camps where they were imprisoned. We're in the visitor center now. It's actually going to be closing in a few minutes, so we're not going to have that much time to look around. And over here are flags with the names of the 10 different internment camps. Here's a model of what the camp looked like when it was active. Families lived in rows of hastily built wooden barracks, surrounded by barbed wire and watchtowers. Winters here were freezing, summers were brutal, and privacy was almost non-existent. Here's a recreation of one of the barracks at Block 14. The visitor center is now closed, so we've moved out here. And we can see a dirt basketball court over here. I don't think any of this was here the last time I visited the site. They've done a lot of improvements over the last few years to really give you a sense of what it was like when this place was open. But had we come here in the early 1940s, there would just be rows and rows of barracks here. All these signs that we can see in front of us are where barracks once stood. Barracks that would have looked pretty much just like this one. Here is the baseball field, and this has been really built up recently. Last time I was here, there was no backstop or bleachers. Baseball was really big at the camps. He wasn't here, but Kenichi Zenimura, who has been called the father of Japanese American baseball, was incarcerated at the Gila River camp in Arizona. If you think about it, all of these people were taken from their homes and basically put in prison. And yet, they built a community. Schools, gardens, sports leagues. They tried to make life here as normal as they could. We have now moved to the cemetery with this incredible backdrop of the Sierra Nevada. Despite the way they were treated by the government, Quite a few people here even volunteered for the Army, like the 442nd, an all-Japanese-American unit that became one of the most decorated in U.S. history for its size and length of service. About 150 people died here at Manzanar, and 6 are still buried here, mostly infants and older men without families. Manzanar closed in 1945. Decades later, it was designated a National Historic Site, not just to remember what happened, but to remind us what could happen. I'm at the intersection of Highway 395 and Mazurka Canyon Road, and this is maybe the best place to see this from the highway, but I apologize, it's still really hard to see. On top of the mountains to the east of the highway here, currently in that lone shadow, is a rock that is 80 feet tall. That is the Winnedumah Paiute Monument. The Paiute people have lived in this valley for countless generations, and this solitary stone is tied to one of their most enduring legends. One version of the story tells of a warrior named Winnedumah and his brother Tinemaha. The Great Spirit had sent them on a sacred journey, either to protect their people or to seek help in a time of need. The exact reason, that depends on who's telling the story. The journey was long and it tested them, and at one point they became separated. Winnedumah climbed to a high ridge to pray. He stood alone, calling out to the Great Spirit, asking for strength, or forgiveness, or guidance. Once again, it changes with each telling. And then, he was turned to stone. Some say it was a reward for his faith. Others say it was punishment for failing his mission. Either way, his spirit remains, frozen in granite, a guardian overlooking the valley. We've now reached the town of Independence, and as it's starting to get late, we're just going to make a brief stop here. Independence has this really impressive looking courthouse. In 1866, Independence was chosen as the county seat of the newly formed Inyo County, a role that it still holds today. This courthouse was built in 1922 and designed by William H. Weeks and is dedicated to the pioneers of Inyo County. Now we're leaving the town of Independence, but we're not quite done with Independence yet. We're just going to head about 3 miles north of town. So we are now near the site where Camp Independence or Fort Independence once stood. The camp was established on July 4th, 1862, hence the name Camp Independence. This was during what would become known as the Owens Valley Indian Wars. As the camp was first being built, soldiers lived in caves along the creek. The fort was initially abandoned after just a couple of years in 1864, after hostility with the Paiute ended. Then renewed conflict with the Paiute led to the reoccupation of the fort in March 1865. It was ultimately abandoned on July 5th, 1877. Then after the military departed the valley, the native communities in the area held various land allotments next to the fort, and the Fort Independence Reservation was officially established in 1915. The sky in this area sure looks amazing when it starts getting close to sunset. but we still have a couple more stops to make before the day ends. We've reached the town of Big Pine, and the plan is to make a quick stop here for a bite to eat. What I think is a funny tidbit about this town is that the official town name did not have a space between the words Big and Pine between 1895 and 1962. When it was founded in 1870, there was a space, and for whatever reason 25 years later, they took it out for the next 67 years before adding it back in. This is Copper Top Barbecue here in Big Pine, and it was selected as the best restaurant in America by Yelp in 2014. I know that was over 10 years ago, but it's still pretty good. And in case you get here after hours, they even have barbecue in the vending machine. And this is dinner. I got the tri-tip, my wife got the chicken sausage. Dinner was great, and it really hit the spot after a long day of exploring the highway, but we're now a little further down the road at the turnoff for the ancient bristlecone pine forest. We're not going to go to the ancient bristlecone pine forest on this trip, but it's about 24 miles from here. There's also a marker here for the Westgard Pass toll road, an old wagon road through the mountains that later became an auto road. But I stopped here to talk about a tree. No, not this tree. I'm talking about a tree that was over here. Some people used to think that this was the tree that Big Pine was named for, but it wasn't a pine tree and the town predated it. But it was the Roosevelt tree, named for President Teddy Roosevelt. And as this historic marker says, the tree was planted on July 23rd, 1913. These giant sequoias could live about 3,000 years, but this one only made it to 107. Years of drought did it in, as these trees don't usually live in this type of environment. So in 2020, it was cut down, but as you can see from this picture, it was impressive while it was here. Unfortunately, the Roosevelt tree is now just a stump. But the sun is setting over the Sierra, so I will see you in the morning. Good morning, everyone. We're starting out today at Keough Hot Springs. Now, we didn't stay here, nor do we plan on using the facilities today, but I thought this place had a pretty interesting story, so I wanted to check it out. Keough Hot Springs are nestled right at the bottom of the Sierra. For centuries, the Paiute used the hot springs here, but in 1918, a guy named Philip Keough, a former stage line superintendent, saw potential here, bought the land, and turned it into a full-blown resort, calling it Keough's Radium Hot Springs. The resort had bathhouses, cabins, a dance hall, and even a restaurant. According to this sign, this old bathhouse was built with stones, representing ore from local mines. Mining was no longer the dominant industry in the area by this time, but it was still very important to the economy. This resort was very popular in the 1920s and 30s, up until the beginning of World War II. The biggest reason for the decline was because in 1926, Keough sold the property and its valuable water rights to the city of Los Angeles as part of the city's massive water acquisition efforts in the Owens Valley. With the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power owning it, They only granted short-term leases, so no one running the resort had any incentive to invest in it, leading to it somewhat falling into disrepair. It even got to the point where children weren't allowed to swim here because of the insurance risk. There was new life here in the 1950s and 60s, but by the 80s and 90s, things were bleak. The current owner stepped in 1998, and have really brought the place back, though. The entire hill behind this place is covered in volcanic rock. The water is 127 degrees when it comes out of the ground, so obviously it needs to be cooled before it can be swam in. We've now reached the town of Bishop, and with a population of a little less than 4,000, it is the second largest town in the Eastern Sierra. No visit to Bishop is complete without a stop at Erick Schat's Bakkery. We have some competing signs here. This one says it was established in 1907, and over here it says 1903, which I believe is the correct date. In 1903, the bakery started here in Bishop as a short-order house with a small bakery owned by Ed and Lulu McKean. In 1905, they hired an immigrant from Austria named Robert Schock. He soon purchased the business and renamed it the Vienna Bakery and Short Order House. The bakery's main customers were Basque sheep herders who roamed the high desert and Sierra slopes. These men needed bread that was hearty, simple, and stayed fresh for days. And that's how the bakery's most iconic creation came to be, sheep herder bread. It became what this place was known for. In 1922, the bakery was renamed the Bishop Bakery. Fast forward to the 1950s, and another immigrant, this time from the Netherlands, entered the picture. Jacob Jack Schat found his way to Bishop in 1958. A baker by trade, Jack eventually took over the business and brought his old-world Dutch techniques to the Eastern Sierra. The bakery became Schat's Bakery. Then in 1981, the bakery was renamed Erick Schat's Bakery after Jack's son Erick, who had taken over the reins. The quirky spelling of bakery with the extra K and the dots above the Y was Erick's nod to the family's European roots. It was under Erick that the bakery became a Highway 395 legend. These days, the bakery is said to have over 100 different kinds of baked goods for sale. By the 2000s, the bakery was producing over 25,000 loaves of bread a day and shipping to grocery stores across Southern California. It became one of the busiest bakeries in the country, despite being in a town of under 4,000 people. Erick Schat passed away in 2021, but the bakery is still run by the family. We are just a few miles off Highway 395 now, just outside of Bishop, at the Laws Railroad Museum and Historical Site. This is the old railroad depot. We'll be checking that out in just a bit. This place is kind of like a time capsule of early 20th century Owens Valley, but most of the buildings here weren't originally here. Like this first building was built for the movie Nevada Smith, starring Steve McQueen. We'll take a quick look in the general store. I love when they have products on the shelf like this, so you really get a feel what it would have been like in the late 1800s. And here's the post office. Even though it looks really old, this was actually the town's last post office that closed in 1963. From the outside, the post office definitely looks like an Old West building, but on the inside, it looks more mid 20th century. This mannequin kind of startled me for a second. I wasn't expecting anyone in here. I'm not actually sure what this is. Maybe a historic doghouse? This house dates to about 1920, but it was moved here in 1989. The town of Laws started in 1883 when the Carson and Colorado Railroad laid tracks down into the Owens Valley. The town was named after R.J. Laws, a railroad agent. This was a key stop on the railroad that connected mining towns, farms, and freight routes all across the eastern Sierra. But the railroad stopped coming through in 1960, and that pretty much spelled the end for the town. After the railroad stopped, Southern Pacific donated the land, the original railroad structures, and a train engine with boxcars and a caboose to the city of Bishop and Inyo County. The Bishop Museum and Historical Society was formed in 1964, and this museum opened in 1966. Along with the actual station, the agent's house here is, I believe, the only other building still in its original location. This house dates to 1883, and it's where the agent in charge of the station would have lived. I'm not sure if we're able to go inside or not, but let's take a look. Here's the plaque, constructed in 1883. And the door opens. Let's head on in. And this probably looks a lot like it would have looked had we come here in the late 1800s. This is a pretty nice house. And for the late 1800s, it's a really nice house. But I can't imagine how loud it would have been living here, right next to the railroad tracks. Trains are loud now, but those early railroads with the smoke and the noise, if you lived here, you knew when the train was coming. You also knew when somebody was walking around the house. This floor is creaky. Here's an old telephone. I bet a lot of kids now would have no idea what this is. And here is the kitchen. No refrigerator, but there is an icebox. Here's one of the local residents trying to get some shade under this boxcar. This place is 11 acres in size, and one of the docents said he calls this place 11 acres of awesome. I have to agree, I could easily spend all day here. Here's engine number 9 that was donated by Southern Pacific in 1960.
Pretty brutal. Yeah, it got pretty brutal way back in the day. So here's the slim girl. Was it Mr. Mull? I can't remember his name.
There is the Sierra in the background. Land on all sides of the museum is owned by the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. The city of Los Angeles owns a lot of land in this area because of their water rights acquisitions back in the early 1900s. I'm heading over to the train station now, but I just noticed this garage. What I really wanted to check out was all these old street signs. And this barn is just completely filled with old wagons. This place is just absolutely amazing. There is so much stuff here. I definitely plan on coming back and spending more time here pretty soon. All of these different types of wagons. This one here was like the semi-truck of its day. And by comparison, here's the Mini Cooper of its day. There's even a dog sled in here. I'm trying to make it to the train station, but I just keep getting distracted by all the stuff here. I have to say, this is a pretty bad place for a sundial. Because of the shade, you would never be able to tell the time with this thing. Though to be fair, the sundial probably predates the tree. Okay, we're finally making it to the old station, and this station looks incredible. We're so lucky this was preserved and not torn down. This would be the perfect place to film a scene in a western. It still looks like a train could come through at any minute. And we better be careful crossing the tracks. Alright, let's head up here and take a closer look. Being at the station and with all this wood, it kind of reminds me of the opening scene of the movie Once Upon a Time in the West, just with a lot more trees around. I'm glad to see they're very safety cautious at this station. But let's go ahead and take a look around inside. Wow, this is really cool. If we were here 100 years ago, this would have all been filled with cargo. There are some model trains in here, but I've been pushing the button and they don't seem to be operating right now. And there's another model train over here. But let's see if we can find the passenger area and the ticket office. So this would have been the baggage room. And that means the passenger waiting area should be right through this door. And yeah, here it is. And check out this old iron stove to help keep the passengers warm. And check it out, they have a poster for Carrizo Gorge. That's by San Diego. And let's head into the ticket office. So that's the 1883 Laws Railroad Station. But it's time for us to get back on the road. And according to this fish, it's about 26 miles to our next stop. It all began in 1917, when a German-born entrepreneur named Hans Loff built a humble gas station and cafe to serve weary travelers and locals. Back then, it was simply known as Hans Loff's. Then in 1923, Thomas Jefferson Yerby, originally a tailor, purchased the property for $5,000 and began expanding it into a full-service stop by 1924. Adding cabins, a cafe, and a bar to support the growing seasonal traffic heading toward Yosemite and Mammoth. That's when the resort was officially renamed Tom's Place, and it quickly became known as a welcoming way station for fishermen, hikers, skiers, and anyone driving through the Eastern Sierra. After Tom Yerby died in 1940, Hazel Yerby continued running the business until 1945, when she sold it for $80,000. In 1947, the original lodge was lost to fire and replaced by this current building. Tom's Place is still going strong, and it's a great place to stop and grab a bite to eat, or just grab some snacks for the road. Even on a drive filled with amazing scenery, Convict Lake here really stands out. The lake gets its name from an 1871 prison break. A group of convicts escaped from a jail in Carson City and fled into the Eastern Sierra. A posse tracked them to this remote lake, where a violent shootout took place. One of the posse members, Robert Morrison, was killed, and now the dramatic peak towering above the lake bears his name, Mount Morrison. Also nearby is Mono Jim Peak, which is named for Mono Jim, a Paiute guide who died in the same gunfight. The views at Convict Lake are amazing, and it's only 5 minutes off the highway, so it is a must stop when in the area. And who knows, you might run into a deer in the parking lot. We've driven about 15 minutes from Convict Lake, and are now at another place that is incredibly scenic. This is the Hot Creek Geological Site. Groundwater is being heated by molten rock under the ground, about 3 miles down. Then that water comes up and mixes with the cool creek. This creek runs through the town of Mammoth as Mammoth Creek, but its name changes to Hot Creek through here. And there are warning signs everywhere, so we are going to stick to the trail. Hopefully the camera's picking up the steam rising from that blue pool, but we'll get a closer look in just a bit. Apparently the water temperature can reach up to 199 degrees in some places, but it cools pretty rapidly. But if you see all that bubbling, that is where the hot water is coming up. We could take a closer look right here. Because we're at over 7,000 feet in elevation right now, that water is boiling before the cold water of Mammoth Creek cools it down. There are fish in the area. I don't know how they avoid being cooked, but people do fish here. There are so many incredible sights in this area, but this place is always worth a stop. We are entering the town of Mammoth Lakes now, which actually has the largest population of any town in the Eastern Sierra. There are a ton of restaurants and places to stay here, but we're just cutting through on this trip. We are now at the Mammoth Mountain Resort. And the reason we stopped here is because we are going to ride these gondolas to the top of the mountain. I don't know how I always end up in these things. I'm not really the biggest fan of hanging from a wire while going up a mountain. If it was wintertime, we'd see a bunch of people skiing here, but now it's the perfect time for mountain bikes. I think that's why all the gondolas going down are empty. People are using them to take their bikes up, then riding the bikes down. We haven't seen one go by in the opposite direction yet that's had people in it. And look at that! We're up high enough now where there's still some snow below us. So we've made it to the top of Mammoth Mountain at 11,053 feet, and it's a lot cooler up here than it was down below. And just to show you how cool it is up here, it's the middle of July, and there's still snow on the ground. Here's the Mammoth Mountain summit. This was certainly the easy way to get to the top of a mountain. There's not a lot of snow up here, but as hot as it's been on this trip so far, it's pretty neat to see. I noticed some sort of monument or something over here. I wanted to walk over and check it out and see what it was. I'm not sure why it's all the way over here and not closer to the gondola. It looks like this monument is for 3 ski patrollers who sadly lost their lives on April 6, 2006. Wow, that's incredibly sad, but what an amazing place for a monument. Here's a look back up at the summit and the gondola station. And just check out the view from up here. The view looking to the other side of the mountain is pretty incredible too. There are a number of hiking and biking trails heading down, but we paid nearly $50 a ticket for that gondola, so we're getting our money's worth and riding that thing down. Alright, back down and back to Highway 395. You might be wondering why we're stopping at a random rest area. Well, it isn't the rest area, but what is tucked away behind the restrooms. Supposedly in 1857, 2 men got separated from their group, and near here they stumbled upon a ledge of reddish cement rock that was riddled with chunks of gold, so rich that the gold practically stuck out of the stone. This would go down in legend as the Lost Cement Mine. The 2 men grabbed samples to take with them, but on their way back to civilization, one of the 2 men died. By 1860, the other man was dying of tuberculosis, and he paid his doctor with some of the ore he found and a hand-drawn map to the mine. That doctor got a group together to come out here, but word spread, and before long the area was flooded with miners looking for this gold find. Hundreds of prospectors looked for it all throughout 1862, but it was never found. People kept looking for it for years. Even Mark Twain wrote about the lost cement mine, calling it a phantom that had haunted the region for decades, one that people had died chasing. Who knows? Maybe it was found and kept quiet, it never existed, or it's still out here, near where we travelers stop to pee. We are taking a slight detour off Highway 395 to take the June Lake Loop. It's a 16-mile drive and only adds about 20 minutes to your drive if you don't stop, so it's well worth taking the extra time to do it. It's incredibly scenic, even compared to the already incredibly scenic Highway 395. We will be passing by 3 different lakes on this short drive. Here is June Lake, another amazing mountain lake, and the lake the loop is named for. If you like lake views, Highway 395 is the trip for you, as there are quite a few easily accessible from the highway. People started settling here in the late 1800s, drawn by logging and fishing. But the real development came in the 1910s and 1920s, when the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power built dams and power plants along Rush Creek to help send electricity and eventually water down to Los Angeles. That infrastructure made the area more accessible, and pretty soon, the loop became a getaway spot. Then resorts, fishing cabins, and lodges started popping up by the 1930s, making June Lake a favorite summer spot for tourists and Hollywood stars looking to escape the city. And as you could see, it is still very popular. I'm not sure how well it shows up on the camera, but Horsetail Falls is now visible on the mountain in front of us. We'll be getting a better look at it in just a few minutes. I think if we were here a month or two earlier, it would really stand out even on the car camera, but we'll pull over and get a better view of it. Horsetail Falls is the largest waterfall in the area, with the water dropping 270 feet from Agnew Lake to the valley floor. There is a hike that goes up to it, but it looks pretty impressive from the road too. The waterfall looks best in spring to early summer, but even now in late July, I think there's a decent amount of water coming down. We are now passing by Silver Lake. Roy Carson started the Loop's first private resort, known as Carson's Camp, in 1916. That resort became the Silver Lake Resort, and it's still here going strong, making it, I believe, the oldest resort in the Eastern Sierra. And I love the old Coke icebox they have out in front. We are coming up on our third lake now. This is Grant Lake, and this one is actually a man-made lake or a reservoir. It was created by the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power in 1916 when Rush Creek was dammed. Grant Lake is also the biggest lake on the June Lake Loop. We are about to leave the June Lake Loop and get back to Highway 395, but that doesn't mean we're done with lakes just yet. We are heading to Mono Lake, and this area is called Navy Beach Because in the 1950s and early 1960s, there was a secret Navy facility here to test new weapons and weapon systems and perform seismic testing. We have a short walk from the parking lot to the beach, but as we'll see, the walk used to be a lot shorter. Mono Lake is left over from a much larger lake, Lake Russell, that was around about 12,000 years ago during the Pleistocene era. Because of that, Mono Lake is said to be one of the oldest lakes in North America, dating back at least 760,000 years, though some estimates suggest it may be over 1,000,000 years old. We are coming on a sign now, and as we can see from this sign, this is where the water level was in 1959, and we are quite a ways from the water right now. These towers are called tufas, and they're limestone formations created underwater by a reaction of calcium-rich spring water and carbonate in the lake. As the lake levels have dropped, they've become exposed. In 1941, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power began diverting the lake's tributary streams to provide water to Los Angeles. That was an ecological disaster for this lake, and why we could see these tufas and walk right up to them. The lake dropped over 40 feet, doubled in salinity, and shrunk by nearly half. Here's a sign showing where the water levels in 1963. And this plaque talks about how in 1994, it was ordered that the water levels be restored to this point. Well, here we are over 30 years later, and they've got a ways to go. I know the Los Angeles water rights have come up a lot in this video, as that has been a big part of the Owens Valley history over the last century, and the whole thing has been contentious, even to this day. It would be nice if some of the damage could be reversed, though. But we finally made it. This is Mono Lake. No water flows out, so the only way water leaves the lake is through evaporation. And because of that, it is very salty and alkaline. Apparently, if you swim out into it, you just basically float. And the black edges around the water are all alkaline flies. Because of all the alkaline flies and brine shrimp, birds love this place, and over 2 million stop here annually. But just look how many flies there are. This is like an all-you-can-eat buffet for birds. These tufas are really cool to look at, and like a lot of places along Highway 395, it gives you the feeling of being on another world. But they're also kind of sad knowing that these should be underwater. But with the clouds, late afternoon sun, and the tufas, Mono Lake looks amazing right now. It's kind of hard to see, but there is a huge bird's nest on the tufas out there. I believe it's an osprey nest, but I'm not 100% certain on that. Mono Lake is awesome, but we have one more place to check out today, and luckily, it's not too far away. Dinner tonight will be at this gas station. I know a gas station doesn't normally seem like the best place for dinner, but check out the crowds here. This is the Tioga Gas Mart, home of the Whoa Nellie Deli. Inside it looks like your average gas station convenience store, until you see the menu at the food counter. The Nellie Deli first opened in 1996, and this place serves some pretty gourmet food, and has even been reviewed by publications like the New York Times and Gourmet Magazine. And now, Sidetrack Adventures. And you know it's classy, because they have a chandelier. I got the pork chops with apricot and berry glaze, and my wife wasn't quite as adventurous and got the chili cheeseburger, but that looks pretty great too. Dinner was amazing, and I highly recommend those pork chops. But now it's time to rest up, as we have a lot more Highway 395 left to see. We are passing through Lee Vining this morning. This town was founded in 1852 as a mining camp by Leroy Vining. Here in Lee Vining, there is an upside-down house, which was a Highway 395 roadside attraction that dates back to the 1950s. It used to be right on the highway, a few miles north of here. The house was created by Nellie Bly O'Brien and was moved here sometime after she died in 1984. And hilariously, the historic marker on the house is even upside down. Lee Vining is also known for having some of the highest gas prices in the country. This is over $2 more than we paid for gas in Bishop yesterday. Just past Lee Vining is the Mono Lake Visitor Center and Overlook, and you can get some great views of Mono Lake here. There it is below us. It's incredible to think how there has been a lake here for over 700,000 years. If you look, you could see how there is almost a land bridge to one of the islands, showing the importance of keeping the water levels up. In the 1980s, the water level dropped low enough where coyotes were able to cross to the island and reach the seagull colonies out there during nesting season, devastating them. But it is time for us to get back on the road because we still have a lot of ground to cover. This section of Highway 395 connects to California's three highest mountain passes, the Monitor, Sonora, and Tioga passes. These passes can usually only be accessed in the summer and early fall. As an example, Tioga Pass opened in late May this year and closed in November last year. It's kind of hidden by trees near the Mono Inn here, but this historic marker is for Adeline Carson Stilts, the favorite daughter of the famous frontiersman Kit Carson. She came to this area with her husband in 1858 and died in the winter of 1859 at age 21, and her grave is somewhere near this site. We are going to take another short detour off Highway 395 and head to the most famous and best preserved ghost town in California, Bodie. Most of the road out to Bodie is paved, but the last few miles are dirt. It is well graded, and any car could probably make the drive. The road does sometimes close due to snow, though. This place popped up back in 1859 after a prospector named William S. Bodie, spelled B-O-D-E-Y, discovered gold near what's now known as Bodie Bluff. Bodie died in a blizzard later that year, before a real town was even formed. But his name stuck, even if they couldn't quite spell it right. And from here, you can already see how big this place is. The town is kept in a state of arrested decay, meaning they don't repair anything, but they don't let it fall down either. For a few years, Bodie was just a small mining camp, but that changed in 1875 when the Standard Company hit a rich gold strike. Almost overnight, Bodie transformed into a full-blown boomtown. This is the Methodist Church, built in 1882. You really feel like you're stepping back into the Old West when walking around Bodie. But I guess in a way we are. When I had said that Bodie had become a full-blown boomtown, that might have been a bit of an understatement. By 1880, the population had exploded to nearly 10,000 people, which is more than any town in Mono County has today. At its height, Bodie had everything: homes, hotels, general stores, churches, brothels, an opera house, and at one point, 65 saloons. That's one saloon for every 153 people. And the town became infamous for its violence. There were shootings, robberies, and brawls nearly every night. One writer from the period noted that a common greeting in the morning here was, "Have a man for breakfast?" meaning, did anyone get killed last night? It got so bad that when a 10-year-old girl learned her family was moving to Bodie, she famously wrote in her diary, "Goodbye, God, I'm going to Bodie." Even Mark Twain took a jab at this place, calling Bodie the breakup of one winter and the beginning of the next. And he wasn't wrong. This town sits over 8,000 feet high. Winters here are brutal, snow drifts over 10 feet deep, and winds that'll cut through you like a knife. You even had to worry about the kids here. This is the schoolhouse, but this is the second schoolhouse. The first one was burned down by one of the students. You could see buildings going all the way up into the hills. I mean, just think of how big a 10,000 population town is now. At its peak, Bodie wasn't just wild, it was rich. The Standard Mine alone pulled out over $15 million worth of gold in just over 2 decades. Adjusted for inflation, that's hundreds of millions today. There were other mines too, and more than 30 stamp mills crushing ore around the clock. The hills around Bodie rang with the sound of money. But the boom couldn't last forever. By the 1890s, the gold began to run dry. Fires swept through parts of the town. The big money moved elsewhere. A few tried to hold on, especially when cyanide processing gave new life to the mines around 1900. But it was a short reprieve. By the time the 1930s rolled around, not many people were left. The one thing you do notice when walking around town are electric poles. Not many people realize this, but Bodie was around long enough to have electricity, and even a gas station. The reason Bodie is so well preserved today is because people didn't clean up. They didn't pack up their belongings and call the movers. They just left. What you see in Bodie today is frozen in time. Furniture, dishes, even clothes were left still sitting inside many of the buildings. And this place was hard to get to. Then in 1962, the state stepped in and preserved Bodie as a California State Historic Park. And if you're a fan of the Old West or ghost towns, this is a place you have to visit. I try to stop by every time I pass through the area. We are hitting the town of Bridgeport with a population of just under 400, and we'll be making a brief stop here to check out one of the coolest buildings along this stretch of Highway 395. The Mono County Courthouse here dates back to 1880 and is the second oldest continually used courthouse in the United States. There's a cannon out in front of the courthouse. This is the Irwin. It was built for the Standard Company in Bodie, but then moved here in 1914. And per the plaque, it's never been fired. It looks like the iron fence around the courthouse, though, was made in Cincinnati. Luckily, we're here at the top of the hour and get to hear the courthouse bells. Of course, it is noon, so these are going to go on for a while. Right next to the courthouse is Ken's Sporting Goods. This has been around since 1931. Here's a look down Highway 395 through Bridgeport. The Silver Maple Motel here has a pretty cool neon sign. This was built in the 1930s during the Motor Lodge era. I'm not sure if it's currently open though. They've had the courthouse for over 140 years, but Bridgeport wasn't always the county seat. It was first located in Aurora, until they figured out the town was actually in Nevada and not California. So then in 1863, it was briefly moved to Bodie, and then to Bridgeport in 1864. The county seat was briefly moved back to Bodie in 1879, but with Bodie's growing lawlessness and political disputes, that was reversed, and in 1880, the county seat was back in Bridgeport, where it's been ever since. We're starting to climb into the mountains now, and we'll have the Walker River on our side for a while. Is Highway 395 through the Eastern Sierra the most scenic road trip in California? I don't know, there is a lot of competition, but it's certainly in the running. Plus, there is so much to do in the Eastern Sierra. We only scratched the surface. Then again, we'll have to see if this is even the most scenic part of Highway 395 overall. This is Topaz Lake, called a jewel of two states, as it's in both California and Nevada. And here is the Nevada state line. So that's Highway 395 in California, from Hesperia to the Nevada state line. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and we'll see you next week.